So what happens when your local economy is collapsing and you're walking through the town center and you've got, pawn shops and closed shops and betting shops only? How do we rebuild a broken local economy? And it's called community wealth building. It actually has five principles. Progressive procurement of goods and services, so that a local government or a university or a hospital will actually start buying goods and services from local businesses, circulating that money in the community. Making financial power work for local places by having a local credit union, a local community bank, bringing, community shares, allowing people to raise capital locally and invest it locally. Fair employment and a just labor market. Socially just use of land and property, bringing it into community ownership where possible, and plural ownership of the economy through cooperatives and employee ownership and things like that. So the essence is to keep communities circulating inside the community instead of being extracted by distant shareholders. So the model was pioneered in Preston in Lancashire, which was once the sort of the poorest community in Britain. So you've got, if you look at this closely, you've got the university, the local government, credit union, worker cooperatives, the public pension fund, local businesses. They're called anchor institutions. So when the hospital is spending its money on food, they will now go to local farms and local food businesses instead of, just bringing it in from wherever. And they're encouraging local banking. So to get a good idea of local banking, I really encourage you to go to Netflix and watch this movie called The Bank of Dave, which is a humorous attempt to set up a real bank in Yorkshire. The model is the Bank of North Dakota, which was set up in 2019. There was a kind of big uprising and semi-socialist democratic, revolution attempt in 2019. It got overthrown, but the public bank they set up was so successful they kept it. It's now the most successful financial institution in North America. They give loans for student loans, for farming cooperatives, for people starting businesses, all that sort of stuff. Another piece of this is that we do need to support trade unions and keep them strong. The right of humans to organize is a deep and essential part of our evolutionary inheritance. No one should have the right to say, you can't organize, you can't do this. Without trade unions, we would still have a 120-hour working week, or whatever awful thing it was. We'd still have low wages. Every good thing in the workplace has been achieved by union activities, union organizing, and strikes when necessary. So working with our unions and is an essential part of all this. And that needs to include the people in the gig economy who right now are excluded from unemployment benefits, from healthcare benefits, from sickness benefits, from holiday rights, all that sort of stuff. They need to be included. An awful lot of people are part of the gig economy. We need to help young people start businesses. There is delight in running a business, in starting a cooperative, the excitement of it, the risk, it's a great thing. We need to sort of, in Massachusetts, they have a whole entity called Worcester Youth Cooperatives, training and encouraging young people to start their own cooperatives. We need benefit corporations when a regular business says, actually, what matters to us is making a social difference in the world by, having a social purpose, which to make the best shoes, also be the best, garden service company. There's now, 10,000 B corporations around the world, 3,700 in Britain. And that's a transformation every business can make. And then we need to help people form cooperatives. There are 3 million cooperatives around the world, employing 280 million people. And we need to encourage people to become employee shareholders. So if you're in a business and you think it's going to close or be taken over, we need legal system to enable people to become the shareholders. In America, there's a project called 50 by 50, run by the Democracy Collaborative. Their goal is by 2050, 50 million Americans will enjoy majority employee ownership, backed by legislation and a $100 billion loan guarantee fund. Because the alternative is that when a business is threatened with change, it's taken over by private equity, who have a $3 trillion chest of funds. They're looking for businesses to take over purely to extract the profit. But the key is majority ownership. There's a lot of, they're called ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, where the owners have 10% or 12%. They have no say on the board. They have no say in the direction. They need 51% ownership. So in getting capital into communities is another important part of this. So in Baltimore, neighbors set up the Maryland Neighborhood Exchange, which has allowed 6,000 residents to invest $3 million in local and minority-owned businesses. And so the question is, imagine the impact if all Maryland residents could shift a small percentage of their investments from Wall Street to Main Street. So getting pension funds invested in local community businesses. In Britain, it's done by a project called Community Shares. So when the Crunchy Carrot in Dunbar was threatened, there was a community buyout enabling, however many hundred people to own the restaurant and keep it going. Just need a little sip of water and give you a pause to enjoy the Crunchy Carrot while I crunch my throat. The Loch Ness Hub simultaneously was bought by local people. Overall, £210 million has been raised by 126,000 people. It's being invested in cooperatives, community shops, pubs, renewable energy, housing. And right up here on the Moray Firth, Community Energy Moray is financed by the same community share process, investing in wind turbines, in solar, and probably a lot more. In Nova Scotia, the provincial government has actually set up a system of provincial equity tax credits that have enabled people to invest $100 million in community economic development funds, including food, renewable energy, cooperatives, social enterprises. And Scotland has now gone the next step further. In February of this year, they became the first country in the world to legislate for community wealth building at the national, regional, and local level. So every jurisdiction, municipal council that is required to develop an economic plan based on community wealth building, following the principles we've just been talking about. So let's look at this on a bigger scale. In Quebec, there are 11,200 social purpose organizations that are part of this community wealth economy, doing $48 billion annually in sales and supporting 220,000 jobs. It is huge. In Barcelona alone, there are 5,000 social purpose organizations, 2,400 social organizations, 1,200 worker-owned enterprises, 860 cooperatives, 260 community economic initiatives, 53,000 paid workers, 100,000 volunteers. People of Barcelona really love their city and they're bringing it into community wealth. They just wish there were fewer tourists. And this goes around the world. Most of my examples have all been, from Europe, but in South Korea, there are now 970 self-reliance centers where people help each other, 4,400 social enterprises, and 2,000 village community enterprises, 22,000 cooperatives, and they've built it into legislation with a Social Enterprise Promotion Act and a Village Community Act. In Kerala, Kudumbashri is a village initiative run by women. But get this, there are over 300,000 neighborhood groups where 5 million women are participating to say, what's the priority for our village? Do we need to invest in a health clinic, in starting cooperative businesses, in growing more food, whatever it might be? And they're strongly supported by the government of Kerala, which has had a communist elected government since 1955. It's likely the Americans never found out about it, or else they would invade it and try to knock it over, but they didn't really care because it's just a corner of India. It's every time that government it's changed its names to various social democracy names and stuff like that, but it is the same people who have such a strong commitment to social justice at a grassroots level. In Sri Lanka, the Sabodaya movement has got people in 15,000 villages who have between them built 5,000 preschools, community health centers, libraries, and cottage industries, and started 100,000 small businesses, all without government support, on the principle of helping each other, love and service in the community. The Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, since 1976, they've issued $24 billion in microloans to 9 million borrowers in 50,000 villages, 97% of whom are women. And it's been so successful that it's been copied by the big banks, who then put the interest rate and give micro-lending a bad name because they are exploiting people. But the fundamentals of Grameen Bank are really solid. And then in Venezuela, which really struggles, as a country, the Queca Solar network is involved 50 community organizations with 20,000 members, and they produce affordable goods and services for 100,000 families, with a weekly food fairs that sell 800 tons of fruit and vegetables, Their banking, their credit union services serve 24,000 families, and their health network supports 250,000 people. So this is happening around the world, and it's a whole new economy that's emerging. And the biggest example of this, that the oldest, is Mondragon in the Basque country of Spain, where in 1940s, the priest in the middle, the guy with the dark glasses, Jose Arrizamendi, said, "What is the future for Mondra's economy?" Where it's close to, the place that was bombed so badly in the Guernica, and everyone was struggling. He said, "We don't want a capitalist economy. We don't want a communist economy. We need to build a cooperative economy." So, and by the 1980s, when 30,000 people were unemployed, they had 20,000 people working in 100 cooperatives. They got their own bank, their own colleges, their own welfare system. When the um, $12 billion in annual revenues, high advanced manufacturing. So they have not lost all their manufacturing to China because their wage differential is only 6 to 1. In America, it's 600 to 1. And for a private equity company or a sort of hedge fund, it is 4,000 to 1. So when the financial crisis hit in 2008, instead of firing people, they negotiated wage reductions among themselves of 5 to 10% and kept their full workforce. So today they are an advanced, worker-owned, democratically governed, cooperative industrial economy. They describe themselves as a connection of minds, emotions, responsibilities, visions, words, and projects, a complicity that makes us stronger, a cooperative network that drives our progress, a commitment shared with society. And their supermarkets alone have 1,600 outlets all across Spain, cooperatively owned. And around the region of Mondragon, inspired by their progress, another 1,000 cooperatives have been established. So this new economy, I put a document together that has 148 different names for the new economy. When for 30 years people have been, we know we need something different. They're all alternatives to capitalism.